Identity is something we take for granted today. From the moment we are born, we are assigned a number, a digital footprint, a barcode. We are tracked, catalogued, and filed away in the vast servers of the state before we even take our first steps. We assume this is how it has always been. But if you look back just 1 or 2 generations, you find a different America, an America of ghosts. If you explore your family archives, you might stumble upon a curious document. It looks official, stamped with the weight of the county court, embossed with a seal. But look closely at the dates. Your grandfather was born in 1918, yet the certificate says filed 1952, or perhaps your great-aunt was born in 1905, but her paperwork is dated 1955. This is not a clerical error. It is a scar left by history. It is the delayed birth certificate, a relic from a chaotic moment in time when millions of Americans realized that, legally speaking, they did not exist. This is the story of how a rural, informal nation was forced to become a bureaucratic superpower overnight. This is the story of the paper trail left behind by the invisible generation. To understand the delayed birth certificate, we must first understand the world that preceded it. Turn the clock back to the turn of the 20th century. In 1900, the United States was still largely an agrarian society. The rhythms of life were dictated not by the factory whistle, but by the sun and the seasons. In this world, government was distant. It was something that happened in Washington, D.C., or perhaps the state capital, but rarely did it cross the threshold of a farmhouse in the Appalachians or a tenement in the Lower East Side. When a child was born in the early 1900s, there was rarely a doctor present. Birth was the domain of women midwives, grandmothers, neighbors. It happened in bedrooms lit by kerosene lamps. The proof of that child's arrival wasn't sent to a county clerk. It was recorded in the family Bible. That leather-bound book was the central repository of a family's history. It held the marriages, the births, and the deaths. It was sacred, and for the people of that time, it was sufficient. Why would you need a piece of paper from the government to prove you were born? Your neighbors knew you. The church knew you. You existed because you were there. Legally, the registration of births was a patchwork mess. While the Census Bureau had been pushing for a standard certificate of birth since the establishment of the Permanent Census Bureau in 1902, compliance was voluntary. By 1915, the birth registration are the states that actually submitted reliable data to the federal government covered only about 30% of the population, mostly in New England and the industrialized Midwest. If you were born in rural Georgia, Texas, or the Dakotas before 1920, the odds of a breathless messenger running your vital statistics to the county courthouse were slim to none. Even when forms were filled out, they were often lost. Courthouses burned down, records were water damaged in floods. Names were misspelled by indifferent clerks. So a generation grew up, the generation that would fight World War II and build modern America without any official proof of their citizenship. They were Americans by blood and soil, but on paper they were phantoms. And for a long time it didn't matter. You didn't need a birth certificate to work on the family farm. You didn't need one to buy a general store. You didn't need one to get married, until suddenly you did. The 1930s brought the Great Depression, and with it, a fundamental shift in the relationship between the citizen and the state. The New Deal introduced the concept of the social safety net. But a net requires a roster. You cannot save people if you don't know who they are. The first tremor came with the Social Security Act of 1935. For the first time, the federal government needed to track the earnings of individual workers across a lifetime. To get a social security number, you needed to prove your age and your citizenship. This caused a stir, but the administration was initially lenient. They accepted baptismal records or census records. The system was new, and the government understood that record keeping had been spotty. But the real shock, the seismic shift that would send millions scrambling for paperwork, came not from the banks, but from the battlefield. 1940 and 1941, the shadow of war lengthened across the Atlantic and Pacific. the United States began to mobilize the arsenal of democracy. Defense plants sprang up in Detroit, California, and Seattle. Shipyards clamored for welders. Aircraft factories needed riveters. These were high-paying, secure jobs in a time of lingering economic uncertainty, but they came with a catch. Fear of sabotage and espionage ran high. The government mandated that anyone working in a defense plant must prove their United States citizenship. This wasn't just a formality. It was a matter of national security. Suddenly, a 35-year-old mechanic from rural Alabama, who had been fixing tractors his whole life, walked into a recruiting office in Mobile to build battleships, only to be asked for a paper he had never seen. "Where is your birth certificate?" The hiring manager would ask. "I don't have one," the man would reply. "But I was born here. Ask my mother." That was no longer enough. The result was a bureaucratic traffic jam of historic proportions. In 1940 alone, the Census Bureau received nearly 1 million requests for age verification. County clerks' offices, usually sleepy outposts of local gossip, were inundated with angry, frightened, and desperate citizens. Imagine the panic. You have a family to feed. There is a war on. There is a job waiting for you that pays triple what you made on the farm. But you are barred from the factory gate because a clerk in 1912 forgot to file a form. Letters poured into Washington. "I am a good American," they read. "I have lived here all my life. Why can I not work?" The government realized it had a crisis on its hands. They couldn't staff the factories. If half the workforce was ineligible due to paperwork, a solution had to be engineered, a legal mechanism to retroactively be born. Enter the delayed certificate of birth. The delayed birth certificate was a legal affidavit. It was a court proceeding in miniature. Since the state had no record of the birth, the burden of proof shifted to the individual. You had to prove you were born when and where you claimed. But how do you prove an event from 40 years ago, when the witnesses are dying and the records don't exist? The states established a hierarchy of evidence. The gold standard was a church record, a baptismal certificate or cradle roll created within a few years of birth. But many Americans were unchurched, or their churches kept poor records. So they turned to the affidavit of personal knowledge. This required finding someone, usually an older relative, a neighbor, or the attending midwife if she was still alive, to swear under oath before a notary public. I, Mary Smith, age 72, swear that I was present at the birth of John Doe on June 4th, 1915, and that he is the child of... These affidavits are poignant historical documents. They represent a community vouching for its members. They relied on the strength of memory and the honor of a neighbor's word. If a living witness couldn't be found, the scramble became an archaeological dig into one's own life. Applicants had to produce Class B evidence. Old insurance policies were valuable, as they listed age at the time of signing, school records, if the schoolhouse hadn't burned down, voting registration cards, even inscriptions in family Bibles were accepted, provided the ink and handwriting looked sufficiently old. This process created a fascinating paradox. To get a birth certificate, you had to produce every other document you had acquired since birth. The ultimate fallback was the federal census. If you could prove you were listed as a 3-year-old in the 1910 census, the government would accept that as proof of citizenship. The Census Bureau in Washington was overwhelmed. They hired hundreds of clerks working around the clock in shifts, manually searching through microfilm and giant ledger books to find the names of defense workers. The backlog was measured in months. During that time, families went hungry waiting for the proof of citizenship that would unlock a paycheck. Let's look at a typical example. Here is the delayed certificate for a man we'll call Robert, born in rural Ohio in 1905, but filed in 1942. Look at the evidence listed. Affidavit of mother. Insurance policy issued in 1928. Employment record from 1930. This document serves as a birth certificate, yes, but it is also a biography. It tells us that Robert's mother was still alive in 1942. It tells us he was responsible enough to buy life insurance in his 20s. It creates a constellation of data points that regular birth certificates lack. For the modern researcher, the delayed birth certificate is a goldmine disguised as bureaucracy. When you find a standard birth certificate, you get the basics: parents' names, date, location, But when you find a delayed certificate, you get the story behind the story. Look at the witnesses who swore the affidavit. Was it an aunt you didn't know existed? A neighbor whose name appears on the same census page? This connects your ancestor to their community. Look at the date filed. If it's 1942 or 1943, you know your ancestor likely worked in a defense industry. If it's the early 1950s, it might be related to the Korean War or tightening Social Security requirements. These documents also reveal the literacy levels of the family. Is the affidavit signed with a clear, flowing script? Or is it signed with an X, witnessed by a notary? There is an emotional weight to these papers. They represent a moment of vulnerability. Imagine your grandfather, a grown man of 40, perhaps a father himself, standing in a fluorescent-lit office, cap in hand, asking the government to validate his existence. It was a transition point, the moment America moved from a country of handshake agreements and family Bibles to a country of files, forms, and dossier numbers. By the 1950s, the crisis began to wane. The generation born after 1920 had mostly been registered at birth, thanks to the standardization campaigns and the rise of hospital births. The invisible generation had either successfully registered or was aging out of the workforce. But the legacy remains. The delayed birth certificate system established the strict identity requirements we live with today. It was the precursor to the real ID, the passport card, the digital verification systems of the 21st century. So the next time you browse an online archive or sift through a box of your parents' papers, look for that delayed stamp. Don't just read the date of birth. Look at the date of filing. Think about the gap between those two numbers. In that gap lies a lifetime of living without permission. In that gap lies the story of a rural past colliding with an industrial future. It is a reminder that history isn't just about what happened. It's about what was recorded and what was left behind by time. I'm Jasir, and this has been a Relict documentary. If you enjoyed this exploration into the bureaucratic mysteries of the past, please subscribe to Relict to learn about the stories left behind by time.